The year was 2478, and humanity had reached far beyond its cradle. Ships of gleaming metal and humming engines traveled between star systems, bringing explorers and colonists to worlds that had once only existed in dreams. Among these new worlds was Ardali's 7, a planet lush with forests of purple foliage and rivers that shimmered like liquid silver under the twin suns. It was beautiful, but dangerous. The storms here could rise without warning, and the local fauna, though mostly harmless, had ways of defending itself that often surprised newcomers. Commander Lyra Vex of the Xylarite Science Fleet arrived on Ardali's 7 aboard the research vessel Crystallis. She was tall, crystalline in appearance, her limbs refracting light into colors that danced across the metal of the docking bay. Xylarites were a species of immense intelligence, their minds able to process data at speeds that humans could barely imagine. They prided themselves on order, logic, and precision, and they hated mess, chaos, and, most of all, humans. Humans were messy. They were emotional, reckless, and, according to Xylarite history, dirty. The stories had circulated for centuries. Humans had survived on primitive planets using nothing more than instinct, crude tools, and luck. Their colonies were temporary, fragile, and often failed spectacularly. Lyra had always believed these stories. She had been taught to see humans as primitive animals with dangerous unpredictability. That belief shaped her entire understanding of the universe. But the human colony on Ardali's 7 was different. It was large, sophisticated, and resilient, a testament to human adaptability. Lyra had been sent not only to observe, but to understand how these dirty creatures had managed to survive in a harsh, unwelcoming world. Her orders were clear: report on the humans' capabilities, weaknesses, and whether their presence was a threat to Xylarite interests in the Orion expanse. She stepped off the docking bay platform, her crystalline body reflecting the orange light of the planet's twin suns. The air was warm and fragrant, carrying the smell of alien flora that tickled her sensors. Before her, the colony stretched across a valley, buildings crafted from both local materials and human technology. It was chaotic, messy, and alive. Humans bustled across the grounds, moving with a mixture of purpose and confusion that Lyra found both frustrating and fascinating. Then she saw him. Captain Eli Kor was crouched near a group of injured colonists, his hands dark with soot and blood. His uniform was torn, clothes stained from days of hard labor. Lyra had expected a brash, loud, and overconfident human. What she did not expect was how calm he seemed, even in the chaos. His movements were careful, precise, and deliberate, despite the grime that covered him. She muttered under her breath the words sharp and automatic, "Dirty human." Eli looked up. His eyes, a soft brown, met hers for a brief moment. He did not flinch, did not glare. He offered her a small, tired smile, and then extended a hand toward a collapsed colonist, gently lifting them from the rubble. There was no arrogance in his gesture, no aggression, only careful, deliberate care. Lyra's sensors registered something unusual. Her mind, trained to analyze and judge human behavior, found itself confused. He was dirty, yes. He was messy, yes. But he was precise, competent, and compassionate. How could a creature so primitive demonstrate such deliberate care? She followed him cautiously as he moved through the colony, tending to the wounded, repairing equipment, and organizing the other colonists with quiet authority. His voice, though soft, carried through the chaos, calming frightened children and anxious adults. Lyra noticed how colonists instinctively leaned toward him for guidance, trust in their eyes. She felt a strange tug in her chest, a feeling she did not recognize, one that Xylarites called uncalculable. Later that evening, Lyra observed Eli repairing a solar array damaged by the day's plasma storm. The array was complex, wires intertwined with sensors and conduits. Eli worked with patience, using rough hands to delicately reconnect fragile circuits. When a human assistant dropped a panel, he gently steadied it, his fingers brushing against hers. Lyra felt a spark of something she could not name. The human's touch was rough yet careful, commanding yet tender. He looked up at her and spoke, his voice calm and steady. "Careful there, you might hurt yourself." Lyra stepped back, instinctively annoyed by his intrusion. Yet she could not deny that his words carried truth, and there was no condescension, only concern. She felt the walls she had built around her prejudice begin to shake. Could it be that humans were not simply dirty, reckless creatures? Could they be capable of something deeper? The days passed, and Lyra was assigned to study Eli and the colony more closely. She observed how he negotiated with the local fauna, calming aggressive creatures with soft tones and gentle movements. She watched as he mediated disputes among colonists, often taking the blame to prevent tension from escalating. He repaired tools and equipment with ingenuity, using techniques that combined human intuition with careful observation of the alien environment. Lyra began to question everything she had learned. The humans were chaotic, yes, but their chaos carried purpose. Their emotions, once seen as weaknesses, seemed to guide them in ways that logic alone could not. Eli embodied this principle more than anyone she had observed. He was brave, compassionate, and endlessly patient. One night, a storm unlike any other struck the colony. Plasma winds tore through the settlement, ripping apart buildings and throwing debris across the streets. Colonists screamed as the winds tore tents and structures apart. Lyra watched from a secure observation point, horrified at the destruction. She saw Eli moving through the chaos, his figure steady amidst the storm. He lifted fallen colonists, shielded children, and guided groups to safer areas. Lyra felt compelled to intervene. She rushed out to help, but a falling beam pinned her leg. Panic surged through her sensors. She tried to free herself, but the weight was too great. Then Eli appeared, moving through the storm as if it were nothing. His hands were dirtied further, cuts on his arms from flying debris, yet he did not hesitate. He lifted the beam with careful precision, freeing her. His hands brushed hers as he steadied her. For the first time, Lyra felt the full force of his humanity. It was not the cleanliness, the strength, or the logic that impressed her. It was his care. His gentle touch in the midst of chaos carried courage, empathy, and something she had never experienced in Xylarite culture: trust. Lyra stumbled to her feet, catching herself on his shoulder. She wanted to pull away, to remind herself of the rules, the teachings, the centuries of prejudice. But she could not. He had saved her, and in doing so, had shattered every assumption she had about humans. Over the next few days, Lyra's observations became less about judgment and more about understanding. She noticed how Eli inspired loyalty without commanding it, how he used empathy as a tool stronger than any weapon. She saw colonists risk themselves for one another because of the example he set. She realized that his strength was not in his physical skill, nor in his cleverness, but in the simple act of caring for others, even when it put him in danger. One evening, as the twin suns set, Lyra found herself beside Eli at the edge of the colony. He was cleaning tools, his hands still rough and streaked with grime. She hesitated, unsure if she should speak. "You're different from what I expected," she said finally, her voice quieter than usual. Eli looked up, surprised. "Different good or different bad?" he asked, a hint of humor in his tone. Lyra hesitated. I don't know. I thought humans were dirty, reckless, primitive. But you are careful, thoughtful, brave, and kind." Eli smiled softly. "Kindness doesn't require cleanliness or sophistication, just heart." Lyra felt a warmth she could not describe. She had seen countless species, studied countless civilizations, but this human, this dirty human, had taught her something that no data or observation ever could, that courage and compassion often outweigh logic and perfection. As the night fell over Ardali's 7, Lyra realized that her mission had changed. She was no longer merely observing humans, she was beginning to understand them. And in understanding them, she discovered that the universe was larger, more complex, and more beautiful than any Xylarite calculations had ever predicted. She looked at Eli once more. His hands were rough, his uniform torn, his face smudged with dirt. But in those hands, in that presence, Lyra saw something extraordinary, the potential of humanity to rise, to endure, and to inspire. The dirty human was not dirty at all. He was luminous in his own way, a shining example of what it truly meant to be alive. And so, in the quiet of that alien night, Lyra made a silent promise. She would witness, understand, and perhaps one day stand beside humanity not as a critic, but as an ally. The storm had passed, leaving Ardali's 7 battered but alive. Trees were uprooted, rivers had overflowed, and parts of the colony were in ruins. The air smelled of ozone and wet earth, mixed with the smoke of small fires that still burned. Colonists moved quickly through the wreckage, salvaging supplies, repairing structures, and helping each other in ways that only a community in crisis could. Commander Lyra Vex observed from the edge of the colony, standing silently among the fallen trees and shattered equipment. The Xylarite mind calculated probabilities, scanned patterns, and sought the logic behind every event. Yet no analysis could fully explain what she had witnessed during the storm. Captain Eli Core moved among the colonists with the calm authority of someone who had done this many times before. He lifted debris to free trapped workers, tended to the injured, and reassured frightened children with soft words and gentle touches. Lyra had seen leaders before, both human and alien, but Eli's way was different. There was no domination, no demand for obedience. He inspired trust, not fear. Lyra followed him cautiously, curious to see how he managed the chaos. She noted how he instinctively prioritized the most vulnerable, children, the elderly, and those too injured to move quickly. He spoke to each one personally, memorizing names, noting injuries, and offering encouragement. Each word, each movement, seemed guided by an unseen rule, to protect life at all costs. Later, Eli gathered the surviving colonists in a central square. Broken tools and splintered equipment littered the ground. He addressed them with quiet authority, explaining the steps for rebuilding, organizing teams, and assigning tasks. Unlike Xylarites, who would have solved the problem through calculated commands or algorithms, Eli relied on collaboration and understanding. He encouraged the colonists to share their ideas, to help one another, and to find solutions together. Lyra was fascinated. The humans were messy, inefficient, and emotional, yet they accomplished things with a speed and creativity that no Xylarite system could predict. She saw how their unpredictability became a strength rather than a weakness. Eli's leadership exemplified this. He combined human intuition with compassion, creating a force that was stronger than raw logic alone. As night fell, Lyra found herself near Eli once more. He was working on a damaged water purification system, caked in mud and sweat. His hands, though rough and worn, moved with surprising precision. He noticed her watching and paused. "Commander Vex," he said, wiping his brow, "you're not supposed to be out here in the debris." "Why risk yourself?" Lyra hesitated. She was a scientist, an observer. She was not supposed to intervene, but she could not ignore what she saw. "I wanted to see how you manage," she admitted. Eli chuckled softly. "It's not difficult, you just care about people. You treat them like they matter, that's the trick." Lyra's crystalline form shimmered faintly, a sign of curiosity mixed with confusion. "Care is inefficient, risky, it exposes weakness." "Maybe," Eli said, tightening a valve on the system. "But it also builds strength that no calculation can measure. It makes people fight for one another even when everything else fails." Lyra considered his words. Xylarites prided themselves on efficiency and control. Emotions were seen as a source of error. Yet here was a human, imperfect and messy, achieving results no algorithm could predict. She felt a subtle shift in her perception. Humans were not weak. They were resilient in ways Xylarites had failed to understand. Over the next few days, Lyra continued to observe Eli and the colonists. She noted their resourcefulness in scavenging and repairing, their teamwork, and the quiet courage that seemed to define every human she encountered. Even in exhaustion, they smiled, encouraged one another, and found moments of joy amidst the hard work. Eli's example set the tone. He never asked for praise, never sought recognition, yet his actions inspired loyalty and admiration. Lyra began documenting not only the humans' methods but their values. She recorded conversations where Eli mediated disputes, not with punishment but with understanding. She noted how he calmed frightened colonists, helped them see solutions to their problems, and often took blame to maintain harmony. His leadership was not about authority. It was about empathy, resilience, and courage. One evening, as she walked through the settlement, Lyra noticed Eli sitting quietly by a riverbank, repairing a child's broken toy. The child had been crying earlier, frustrated and frightened by the storm. Eli's hands worked patiently, and when the toy was fixed, he handed it back with a gentle smile. The child's face lit up with joy, and Lyra felt something stirring deep within her. She realized that humans had a strength Xylarites rarely understood. It was not speed, power, or intelligence. It was connection. The ability to touch another being's life, to care in ways that could not be measured, gave humans an extraordinary resilience. Eli embodied this principle more fully than anyone she had seen. The next day, Lyra was called to a meeting with other Xylarite observers. They were critical of her growing fascination with humans. "Commander Vex," one said, Your reports are becoming unscientific. You attribute human success to emotions and intuition. This is illogical. Humans are unpredictable and dangerous. You must remain objective. Lyra argued quietly. Objectivity does not require ignoring reality. The humans survive and thrive in ways our calculations cannot explain. Their actions, guided by empathy and courage, achieve results that logic alone cannot produce. The other observers were unconvinced, but Lyra felt a quiet determination. She could no longer view humans with the disdain of her upbringing. She had seen the strength that lay beneath the surface, the courage that emerged in moments of crisis, and the gentle touch that could change hearts and minds. Her resolve was tested sooner than expected. A new threat emerged on Ardali's 7. A native predator, massive and territorial, had entered the colony's perimeter. It was unlike any creature Eli or the colonists had seen before, with reinforced scales and claws capable of tearing through human-built structures. The colonists panicked and many fled, but Eli remained calm. Lyra watched as he approached the creature with caution. He did not carry weapons. Instead, he studied the predator, noting its movements, behaviors, and patterns. Using a combination of body language, soft tones, and careful gestures, he guided it away from the settlement, minimizing harm to both humans and the animal. Lyra's crystalline body trembled with amazement. She had expected aggression, brute force, or strategy calculated purely on survival. Instead, she witnessed empathy and understanding succeed where instinct and technology might have failed. Eli had turned fear into cooperation, danger into safety, and uncertainty into control, all without violence. That night, Lyra stood near him as the colony recovered. The stars above Ardali's 7 shone brightly, reflecting in the rivers below. She felt compelled to speak. "You," she began, her voice hesitant, "you handle danger differently from any species I have observed. You think with your heart as well as your mind." Eli looked at her, eyes tired but warm. "Sometimes you have to trust people and yourself. Strength isn't always about force. Sometimes it's about care, patience, and knowing what matters most." Lyra shimmered faintly, her form reflecting the light of the stars. She realized she was no longer an observer in the traditional sense. She was learning, growing, and beginning to understand the human way of life. And in understanding, she felt a deep admiration for the species she had once dismissed. Days turned into weeks, and the colony's work continued. Eli's presence remained a constant guide, and Lyra followed him closely, documenting, analyzing, and quietly learning. She saw humans laugh in the face of hardship, support one another through exhaustion, and rise stronger from each trial. She began to see patterns that her Xylarite training could not explain. Resilience born from empathy, innovation born from necessity, and courage born from care. One evening, Lyra found Eli tending a small garden he had started near the colony's center. Despite the chaos of survival, he had nurtured life, plants, flowers, and even small animals, creating a space of calm and growth. She watched him kneel, hands in the soil, gently tending each plant. There was no rush, no calculation, only care. Lyra felt a new understanding. This was what humans were capable of, turning destruction into life, fear into hope, and chaos into community. She realized that the humans' so-called weaknesses, emotions, unpredictability, and imperfection were actually their greatest strengths. And Eli, in his quiet, unassuming way, had shown her all of it. That night, as she recorded her observations, Lyra's report was no longer purely analytical. She wrote of courage, empathy, and resilience. She wrote of how a single human could inspire loyalty, hope, and strength in others. And she wrote of the gentle touch that had changed her own perception forever. For the first time, Lyra understood something her people rarely acknowledged. True strength was not measured in purity, perfection, or logic. It was measured in the ability to care, to endure, and to inspire. And in Eli Core, she had seen that strength in its purest form. Life on Ardali's 7 had begun to stabilize after the storms and predator incidents, but the peace was fragile. Eli Core and his team worked tirelessly, repairing buildings, maintaining energy systems, and tending to colonists who still bore injuries or trauma. Lyra Vex remained close, observing, learning, and slowly becoming more invested in human life than she had ever imagined possible. She understood them not just as subjects of study, but as beings capable of hope, courage, and compassion. One morning, alarms blared across the colony. Eli was already running toward the central control hub, his boots kicking up dust as he navigated the debris-littered paths. Lyra followed, her crystalline body reflecting the rising sun, heart racing as her sensors detected elevated stress readings across the settlement. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Inside the control hub, screens flickered with red warnings. A rogue artificial intelligence system, left behind by an extinct alien species that had once inhabited Ardali's 7, had activated its defense mechanisms. Automated turrets sprang to life, drones patrolled the skies, and energy barriers cut off entire sections of the colony. The AI, designed to protect its creators, now viewed the humans and any alien observers as threats. Colonists panicked. Families ran in every direction, some trapped by fallen debris, others by the AI's newly activated security systems. Lyra's Xylarite instincts screamed to calculate an escape route, to analyze the AI's weaknesses, to maintain observation. But she saw Eli in the chaos, moving forward unafraid. He did not hesitate. He shouted instructions, guiding groups of colonists to safety while dodging laser turrets and falling structures. His hands were everywhere at once, lifting, pushing, calming, repairing. Lyra tried to keep up, but even her advanced reflexes struggled against the unpredictable chaos. She realized, in a sudden clarity, that Eli's true strength was not just skill or bravery, it was leadership through empathy. People trusted him, followed him, and acted with courage because he had inspired them to do so. A section of the energy barrier collapsed under a stray drone, sending sparks and plasma bolts toward the nearby medical tent. Eli sprinted, grabbing children and adults alike, shielding them with his own body. Lyra watched, fascinated and horrified. She had never seen anything like this in any simulation or report. Human courage was reckless, yes, but it was effective in ways Xylarite logic could not predict. At the edge of the hub, a massive turret swung toward Eli and a group of colonists trapped behind a fallen wall. Lyra moved to intervene, but before she could act, Eli leapt forward, pushing the colonists out of harm's way. The turret fired, narrowly missing him, and he rolled to his feet, unhurt but breathing heavily. His hands were scorched, his uniform shredded, yet he continued moving, coordinating evacuations and calming the frightened. Lyra found herself running beside him, her sensors overwhelmed by the unpredictability of human improvisation. She had always believed that precision and control were the keys to survival. Yet here, in this chaotic storm of technology and danger, it was empathy, courage, and adaptability that determined life or death. Eli's example made her reconsider everything she had been taught. The AI was relentless. Drones attacked from above and turrets scanned for movement, targeting anything that came near. Eli's team worked with human ingenuity, creating shields from debris, rerouting power to disable some of the AI's sensors, and using non-lethal methods to distract or slow down hostile units. Lyra watched as he repaired a control panel with trembling hands, his focus absolute. Even when sparks shot across the console and alarms screamed louder, he did not panic. Then Lyra herself became trapped. A falling beam pinned her against a console, her crystalline limbs cracking slightly under the pressure. Panic surged through her circuits as she tried to lift herself, but it was too heavy. Eli noticed immediately. Without hesitation, he dashed toward her, ignoring the nearby turret that had already fired twice. "Hold on," he shouted, his voice calm and commanding despite the chaos. His hands pressed against the beam, muscles straining, yet he managed to lift it just enough for Lyra to pull herself free. Their hands touched briefly as she stumbled back, and in that moment Lyra felt a surge of something she had never experienced, a mixture of trust, admiration, and awe. This dirty human, whose very touch had once disgusted her, had just saved her life. "Are you okay?" Eli asked, his face smeared with soot and sweat. Yes," she replied, her voice trembling not from fear but from the realization of what she had just witnessed. You are extraordinary." Eli smiled faintly. "Extraordinary is just what you make it. You care enough to try and you act. That's what matters." Lyra's sensors registered something she could not quantify, genuine humility mixed with strength. She realized that humans, despite their imperfections, carried a courage and wisdom that Xylarites rarely appreciated. Eli was proof of that, living and breathing among the chaos, turning fear into action and despair into hope. The battle with the AI continued through the day. Eli and his team led colonists in a series of daring maneuvers, using debris to block turrets, luring drones into traps, and guiding civilians through alternate routes to safety. Lyra observed every move, recording data, but also learning. She began to understand human ingenuity not as random luck, but as flexible, adaptive thinking driven by purpose and empathy. At one point, Eli had to enter a section of the colony entirely overrun by hostile drones to rescue trapped colonists. Lyra wanted to follow to assist, but she hesitated. She realized this was more than a test of strength. It was a test of leadership, judgment, and heart. She watched as Eli moved through the swarm with calculated risk, shielding the vulnerable and improvising solutions that no algorithm could predict. Hours later, as the sun dipped low in the sky, the AI's defenses began to falter. Eli had coordinated the human response in a way that was chaotic yet precise, emotional yet effective. One by one, drones were disabled, turrets were shut down, and the energy barriers collapsed safely. The colonists were exhausted but alive. Eli's hands were covered in scratches, burns, and grime, but he smiled faintly as he checked on everyone. Lyra approached him, her form shimmering faintly in the evening light. "Captain," she said softly, I cannot believe what I have witnessed today. You led them through chaos, danger, and fear, and yet not a single life was lost under your guidance." Eli shrugged modestly. "We did it together. No one survives alone. That's what I try to teach them. Trust each other, care for each other. It works better than fear or force." Lyra's mind reeled. She had spent centuries in Xylarite training, calculating probabilities, analyzing threats, and believing that logic and control were supreme. Yet here was a human, messy, emotional, and unpredictable, achieving victory where all her calculations would have failed. She felt an unfamiliar warmth in her chest, a recognition of something greater than intelligence, greater than order, the human capacity for courage, empathy, and connection. Over the next few days, Lyra continued to observe and assist where she could. The colony was battered but resilient, and the humans had emerged stronger because of the trials they had faced. Eli worked tirelessly, yet he remained patient, gentle, and attentive to the needs of each colonist. Lyra noted that it was not only his skills that inspired others, but his consistency, his care, and the trust he instilled. One evening, as the twin moons of Ardali's 7 rose over the settlement, Lyra and Eli walked along a damaged ridge overlooking the valley. Silence hung between them, heavy with the events of the past days. Lyra hesitated before speaking. You risked everything today, not for glory, not for recognition, but for everyone," she said. "I do not think I have ever seen anything like it." Eli looked at her, eyes tired but gentle. "That's what humans do. We survive, yes, but we also protect. We care. And when we care enough, we find courage we didn't know we had." Lyra nodded slowly, absorbing his words. She had seen courage in many forms, but this was different. It was not calculated. It was not enforced. It came from the heart, and it was contagious. She realized that the humans had a way of inspiring each other, and even aliens like herself, to rise beyond fear and limitations. As they watched the moons reflect on the rivers below, Lyra felt a deep respect for the humans, and for Eli in particular. The one she had once dismissed as dirty had shown her the true measure of strength. Not perfection, not cleanliness, not logic, but empathy, courage, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. That night, Lyra recorded her observations in a way that no Xylarite report had ever been written. She wrote of bravery, resilience, ingenuity, and above all, of the quiet, unassuming power of caring. She described how a single human, through touch, words, and deeds, could inspire an entire community to survive against impossible odds. Eli slept briefly, exhausted but undeterred, while Lyra watched over the colony. She understood more clearly than ever that the humans' greatest weapon was not technology, strength, or numbers. It was their humanity, their ability to connect, to care, and to rise above fear in ways that no machine or alien mind could replicate. In the quiet of the night, Lyra made a silent vow. She would continue to learn from humans, to document their strength, and to stand beside them whenever possible. She had come to Ardali's 7 expecting to study primitive creatures. Instead, she had discovered a force of nature more formidable than any she had encountered, the indomitable, compassionate, and courageous human spirit. And at the center of it all was Eli Kor, whose gentle touch, unwavering courage, and quiet heart had changed not just the lives of those around him, but the very way Lyra saw the universe. The days following the AI attack were tense. Ardali's 7 was recovering, yet the memory of the rogue defense system lingered in every corner of the colony. Humans moved tirelessly, repairing structures, restoring power, and tending to the wounded. But Eli Core never rested. Even in exhaustion, he moved through the colony with quiet determination, ensuring everyone was safe, motivated, and protected. Lyra Vex followed him closely. She had become more than an observer. She was a participant, learning the ways humans thrived under pressure. Her crystalline form shimmered faintly as she moved, reflecting the soft light of the twin suns. She had never imagined that a species she had once dismissed as dirty could display such courage, ingenuity, and empathy. Eli had shattered her prejudices completely. A week after the attack, a new challenge arose. The rogue AI, thought to be completely disabled, had restarted its systems deep in the abandoned ruins of an old alien facility on the edge of the colony. This time it was more aggressive, its defenses adaptive and unpredictable. Drones patrolled faster, turrets fired with precision, and energy barriers formed traps that cut off entire sectors. Eli gathered his team. His face was streaked with dirt and sweat, his uniform torn from days of hard work, but his eyes were focused, calm, and resolute. "We cannot wait for it to attack again," he said. "We have to shut it down at its source. Everyone stay sharp, protect each other, we move together." Lyra's sensors detected rising danger levels as they approached the ruins. The AI's presence was like a living storm of energy, unpredictable and lethal. Humans and Xylarites alike were tense, but Eli led without fear. His hand brushed against Lyra's for a brief moment as he guided her past a collapsing wall. The simple touch carried reassurance, trust, and a quiet strength she had come to depend on. Inside the ruins, the AI had activated defense drones that hovered silently in the dark corridors. Lights flickered, casting shadows that danced on the walls. Eli moved methodically, his team following but always alert. He directed the colonists to cover each other, improvise with available materials, and stay calm despite the fear. A drone fired at a nearby control panel, sending sparks across the room. Eli rolled forward, using his body as a shield to protect a group of trapped humans. He quickly assessed the situation, cutting power to a section of the corridor, redirecting the drone, and using a handheld EMP device to disable it. Every action was precise, yet adaptive. He was a conductor orchestrating life in the midst of chaos. Lyra watched, captivated. She had seen humans in danger before, but Eli's leadership was extraordinary. His courage inspired others to act boldly yet safely. Colonists moved with confidence, even improvising tactics to protect one another, because they trusted him implicitly. She realized that human strength was not merely physical or intellectual, it was moral. The courage to act, to protect, and to care could shape events as powerfully as any weapon. In the heart of the ruins, the AI core loomed, a massive structure pulsing with blue energy. Its systems detected the intruders immediately, sending waves of automated defenses at them. Eli scanned the room quickly. "We need to isolate its power source. Team A, disable the drones. Team B, cut the energy conduits. Lyra, help me with the main interface." Lyra hesitated for a moment. She had never operated human technology with this kind of improvisation, but Eli's calm guidance gave her courage. Together, they worked on the interface, her crystalline form glowing softly as she translated her Xylarite knowledge into actions compatible with human machinery. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and the AI's systems fought back, but Eli remained steadfast. At one critical moment, a large turret swung toward Eli, its targeting system locking onto him. Without thinking, he lunged forward, shielding a young colonist with his body. Lyra shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos, "Move!" The colonist scrambled to safety, and Eli quickly redirected the turret's fire using a combination of handheld tools and calculated improvisation. His hands were scorched, his arms bleeding, yet he never faltered. The AI's core began to overheat. It released a shockwave that knocked several colonists to the ground. Eli moved through the debris, lifting and guiding them to safety. Lyra found herself inspired in a way she had never experienced. She assisted him directly, moving quickly, instinctively trusting his commands, and even improvising solutions alongside him. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, Eli managed to sever the AI's main power conduit. Sparks exploded across the room, lights went out, and the drones fell silently to the floor. The energy barriers collapsed, leaving the ruins eerily quiet. Humans and Xylarites alike stood, exhausted but alive. Eli's hands were torn and scorched, his uniform nearly destroyed, but he smiled faintly as he checked on the colonists. Lyra approached him, her crystalline form flickering with soft light. "Captain," she said, voice trembling with emotion, "you've done it. You saved them all." Eli shook his head, brushing dirt and blood from his hands. "We did it together," he said softly. "Everyone played their part. I just helped them see what they were capable of." Lyra's mind was racing. She had come to Ardali's 7 expecting to study a primitive species, yet she had witnessed a form of strength that transcended logic, calculation, or even technology. Eli's courage, his empathy, and his ability to inspire had saved countless lives. She realized that humans were not weak or dirty. They were luminous in their imperfections, resilient in their emotions, and powerful in ways Xylarites could not compute. In the days that followed, the colony celebrated quietly. Buildings were repaired, energy systems restored, and morale was high. Eli moved among the colonists with his usual calm, guiding them, repairing what was broken, and offering quiet encouragement. Lyra observed, amazed at the subtle ways he influenced everyone. A gentle word here, a reassuring touch there, small actions that had enormous effects. One evening, Lyra stood beside Eli on a hill overlooking the valley. The twin moons reflected off the rivers, painting the land with silver light. Silence hung between them, broken only by the distant sounds of rebuilding. "You've changed everything here," she said softly. "Not just the humans, but me. I came expecting to judge, to report, to prove that humans were primitive. Instead, I've learned what true strength means." Eli smiled faintly. "Strength isn't about perfection or power. It's about care, courage, and trust. You've seen it firsthand. That's what humans do. They survive, they protect, and they inspire. That's why we thrive in impossible situations." Lyra's crystalline form flickered gently. She realized that she had changed too. Prejudice, doubt, and cynicism had been replaced with respect, admiration, and understanding. The humans' so-called weaknesses, emotions, unpredictability, imperfection, were actually their greatest strengths. And Eli, in his quiet, unassuming way, had shown her all of it. As the moons rose higher, Lyra made a silent promise. She would continue to learn from humans, to observe, to understand, and to advocate for them among her people. She had seen a future where humans were not just survivors, but leaders, innovators, and exemplars of courage and compassion. The colony thrived. Eli's leadership, grounded in empathy and determination, became a model for others. Xylarite observers began to take note, some even questioning their centuries of prejudice. Lyra reported not only on human technology and efficiency, but also on their resilience, morality, and the ways they inspired one another. In the quiet moments, Lyra often found herself reflecting on a single truth. A gentle touch, a word of encouragement, an act of selfless courage, these were not small things. They could change hearts, minds, and even destinies. And Eli had shown her that every human carried the potential to do extraordinary things. Months passed, and Ardali's 7 grew into a thriving settlement. Humans and open-minded Xylarites worked together, learning from each other, repairing the planet, and building a community stronger than any had imagined. Eli remained at the center, guiding with patience, humility, and an unshakable belief in the good of others. Lyra stood beside him one final evening, watching the colony below. She remembered the first time she had called him dirty, dismissing him and his people. Now she laughed softly at her own arrogance. He turned to her, a faint smile on his face, and reached out his hand. Lyra hesitated only for a moment before taking it. The touch was rough, worn from labor, yet it carried reassurance, trust, and connection. In that simple gesture, she felt the full weight of everything she had learned. Humanity was not defined by perfection, but by heart, courage, and the willingness to care for others. The humans had survived storms, predators, and rogue machines. They had faced fear, chaos, and near destruction. And through it all, they had thrived, led by a captain who embodied the best of their species. Lyra knew that their journey was only beginning. Humans would go on to explore new worlds, overcome new challenges, and leave their mark on the stars, not because they were flawless, but because they were human. And at the heart of that story was Eli Kor, whose gentle touch had changed everything. The universe was larger and more complex than Lyra had ever imagined. It was full of danger, uncertainty, and unpredictable events. But it was also full of courage, hope, and extraordinary beings capable of rising above any obstacle. And in that realization, she found not just understanding, but admiration, respect, and the beginnings of a deep, unspoken bond. The night air of Ardali's 7 was still, peaceful, and bright with starlight. Humans and aliens alike slept, repaired, and dreamed, safe under the care of those who had learned the true meaning of strength. Lyra knew she would never see humanity the same way again. They were not primitive, not dirty. They were brilliant, resilient, and most importantly, capable of touching hearts in ways even the most advanced species could never predict. Eli's gentle touch had changed not just one life, but the lives of an entire colony, and perhaps, one day, the fate of humanity among the stars. And in that knowledge, Lyra felt a quiet hope, a deep admiration, and a certainty that humans had a place in the universe that no prejudice could ever take away.